Captain Sarah Chen stared at the rusty heap of metal floating in the salvage yard's zero-gravity dock. The ship looked like someone had taken a proper starship and beaten it with a hammer for 3 months straight. Paint peeled off in chunks, revealing corroded hull plating underneath. One of the engine nacelles hung at an odd angle, clearly damaged beyond repair. "This is what you're offering me?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the disappointment out of her voice. She needed a ship desperately, but this thing looked more like scrap metal than a functioning vessel. Kex, the four-armed Zolonian salvage dealer, chittered with what passed for laughter among his species. His translator box crackled with static as it converted his words. "Human, you said you had 5,000 credits. This is what 5,000 credits buys. The Wandering Star. Registration number XK7749, built on Earth 40 years ago. Still has her original fusion reactor." Sarah walked around the ship, her magnetic boots clanging against the dock's metal surface. The Wandering Star was roughly the size of a small cargo hauler, maybe 60 meters long. She could see where someone had tried to patch holes in the hull with whatever materials they could find. Some patches were clearly made from different ships entirely, creating a patchwork appearance that would make any respectable shipyard worker weep. "The engines work?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "The left one does. The right one, well, it makes interesting noises. Very musical." Kex's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of amusement. "The life support systems function adequately. The artificial gravity generator works most of the time. The navigation computer is only 3 generations out of date." Sarah sighed. 3 months ago, she had been the proud owner of a beautiful exploration vessel, working for the Terran Survey Division. Then the Krex Empire had decided that humans were expanding too quickly into what they considered their territory. Her ship had been one of the first casualties in what the news networks were calling border tensions. But what everyone knew was the beginning of a war. Now she was stuck on Kepler Station, a neutral trading post on the edge of civilized space, with barely enough credits to buy passage home, let alone start over. The insurance payout for her destroyed ship would take months to process, if it came through at all. She needed work, and she needed it now. "What about the fuel tank?" she asked, running her hand along what looked like the access panel. "How much does she hold?" Kex's translator sparked. That is the interesting part. The previous owner, a human like yourself, he modified the fuel system. Very strange design. Tank holds much more than it should for a ship this size, almost like he built the entire ship around the fuel tank instead of the other way around. Sarah frowned. That did seem odd. Most ship designers started with the crew compartments and cargo holds, then fitted the engines and fuel systems around them. Building a ship around its fuel tank was like designing a house around the plumbing. "Can I see the engine room?" Kex led her through the ship's airlock, which wheezed and groaned but managed to cycle properly. The interior was even worse than the exterior. Exposed wiring ran along the ceiling, held in place with what looked like standard household tape. The lighting flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the bulkheads. But when they reached the engine room, Sarah stopped in surprise. Unlike the rest of the ship, this compartment was immaculate. The fusion reactor hummed quietly, its containment field glowing with a steady blue light. The fuel tank dominated the space, a massive cylindrical structure that did indeed seem too large for a ship this size. The previous owner was very particular about maintaining this room, Kex explained. He spent more on keeping the engines perfect than he did on life support. Strange priorities even for a human. Sarah examined the fuel tank more closely. The construction was definitely non-standard. Instead of the usual titanium steel composite, this tank appeared to be made from some kind of exotic alloy she didn't recognize. The surface had an odd shimmer to it, like oil on water. "What happened to the previous owner?" she asked. Kex's forearms made a gesture that the translator interpreted as a shrug. "He died in his sleep 2 months ago. Natural causes," the station medical officer said. "His estate sold the ship to me for scrap value. I have been trying to find a buyer ever since." Sarah did some quick calculations in her head. Even with the engine problems and the cosmetic damage, the ship had potential. The fuel tank alone might be worth more than the asking price if it was made from the exotic materials it appeared to be. And she was running out of options. "I'll take it," she said. Kex's eyes widened in surprise. "You will? Even after seeing the condition?" "Especially after seeing the condition. Nobody else will want this piece of junk, which means I can afford it." Sarah pulled out her credit chip. "Transfer the registration to Sarah Chen, formerly of the Terran Survey Division." The transaction took only a few minutes. Sarah watched her savings disappear from her account and tried not to think about how she was going to eat next week if this gamble didn't pay off. But something about the ship intrigued her. Maybe it was the way the previous owner had lavished attention on the engine room while letting everything else fall apart. Maybe it was the unusual fuel tank design. Or maybe she was just desperate enough to convince herself that this rust bucket held promise. After Kex left, Sarah stood alone in her new ship, listening to the various creaks and groans that seemed to come from every bulkhead. The lights flickered again, and somewhere in the distance she could hear what sounded like a small animal, scratching inside the walls. She pulled up the ship's registration files on her portable computer. The Wandering Star had an interesting history. Built in the Luna shipyards in 2387, originally designed as a long-range survey vessel, it had changed hands 17 times in the past 40 years, spending time as a cargo hauler, a passenger transport, a mining survey ship, and even briefly as a luxury yacht for an eccentric billionaire who had apparently tried to turn it into a mobile art gallery. The most recent owner, Dr. Marcus Webb, had purchased it 5 years ago and spent most of that time traveling alone through the Outer Rim territories. His logs, what few remained, showed a pattern of visits to various archaeological sites and abandoned worlds. Nothing particularly unusual for an independent researcher. But as Sarah dug deeper into the files, she began to notice something odd. Dr. Webb's fuel consumption records didn't match the ship's specifications. According to his logs, the Wandering Star had traveled distances that should have required multiple refueling stops. Yet Webb had somehow managed these journeys on a single tank of fuel. Either he had been falsifying his records, or there was something very unusual about this ship's fuel system. Sarah spent her first night aboard the Wandering Star trying to figure out which systems actually worked and which ones just pretended to work. The environmental controls seemed to have a mind of their own, cycling between uncomfortably warm and freezing cold every few hours. The food synthesizer produced something that was technically edible, but tasted like recycled cardboard, and the sleeping quarters smelled like someone had been storing fish in them. But the more time she spent examining the ship, the more convinced she became that Dr. Webb had been hiding something. The fuel consumption records weren't the only anomaly. The ship's mass readings were all wrong too. According to the sensors, the Wandering Star should have been at least 20% heavier than it actually was. She decided to start with what she knew best: the engines. Sarah had been working on starship propulsion systems since she was 16, starting as an apprentice in the orbital shipyards above Mars. If there was something unusual about this ship's power plant, she would find it. The fusion reactor itself appeared completely standard. It was an older model, sure, but still within acceptable parameters. The deuterium injection system looked normal. The plasma containment field generators were functioning properly. But when she started tracing the fuel lines, things got interesting. Instead of running directly from the tank to the reactor, the fuel lines took a bizarre detour through what appeared to be some kind of processing chamber buried deep in the ship's hull. Sarah had never seen anything like it in 40 years of working with starships. The chamber was roughly spherical, about 2 meters in diameter, and made from the same exotic alloy as the fuel tank. "What the hell were you doing, Webb?" she muttered as she tried to make sense of the schematics. The processing chamber wasn't connected to any of the ship's other systems. It had its own power supply, its own computer control system, and what looked like its own set of sensors. But the purpose of the device remained completely mysterious. Sarah spent the next day trying to access the chamber's computer systems, but they were protected by encryption she had never encountered before. Not Terran encryption, and not any of the standard galactic protocols either. The computer interface was text-only, displaying symbols that shifted and changed even as she watched them. It was frustrating enough that she almost called Kex to see if he knew anything more about the ship's history. But something held her back. If this was some kind of advanced technology, she didn't want word getting out until she understood what she was dealing with. On her second day aboard the ship, Sarah discovered she wasn't alone. She was crawling through a maintenance shaft, trying to trace some loose wiring, when she heard voices coming from the cargo hold, quiet voices speaking in what sounded like Krek's battle language. Sarah froze. The Krek's empire was technically at war with humanity, though so far the conflict had been limited to border skirmishes and diplomatic protests. But if there were Krek soldiers on her ship, she was in serious trouble. Moving as quietly as possible, she made her way back to the main corridor and grabbed the only weapon she had, a plasma welding torch from the toolkit. It wasn't much, but it might give her a few seconds to escape if things went badly. The cargo hold was dark when she peered through the access hatch, but she could see movement in the shadows and the soft green glow that came from Kreck's personal equipment. At least 3 figures, maybe 4. Sarah was trying to decide whether to confront them or sneak back to the communications array when one of the figures stepped into the light. It wasn't a Kreck soldier. It was a Kreck civilian, wearing the simple robes of a scholar or scientist, and he was looking directly at her. "Captain Chen," the figure said in accented but clear English. "Please do not be afraid. We mean you no harm." Sarah stepped into the cargo hold, keeping the welding torch ready. "Who are you? How did you get on my ship?" "My name is Thex 7, and these are my colleagues." The Krecks gestured to 2 other figures who emerged from the shadows. Like him, they wore civilian clothing and carried scientific equipment rather than weapons. "We have been waiting for someone to purchase this vessel." "Waiting? For how long?" "Since Dr. Webb's death. We knew that eventually someone would buy the ship, and we hoped that person would be curious enough to discover what Dr. Webb was truly working on." Sarah kept her distance, but lowered the welding torch slightly. "You knew Webb?" "We worked with him for 3 years. He was brilliant for a human. Perhaps too brilliant for his own good." Thex 7's voice carried what sounded like genuine sadness. "What do you know about zero-point energy extraction?" The question caught Sarah off guard. Zero-point energy was theoretical physics, the idea that you could extract usable power from the quantum vacuum itself. Scientists had been trying to make it work for centuries, but the energy requirements to create the necessary conditions always exceeded the energy output. "It's impossible," she said. "Every attempt to build a zero-point generator has failed. Not impossible, merely very, very difficult." Thex 7 moved closer, and Sarah could see that his usual Kreck's confidence was replaced by something like excitement. "Dr. Webb discovered that the quantum vacuum is not uniform throughout the galaxy. In certain regions of space, the background energy density is significantly higher than normal. That's ridiculous. The quantum vacuum is a universal constant, so we thought. But Webb proved otherwise. There are pockets of space where the fabric of reality itself has been stressed, twisted. Areas where the normal laws of physics operate slightly differently." One of the other Krecks, a female named Keth9, stepped forward. "The processing chamber in this ship is designed to detect and harvest that energy. It converts the quantum fluctuations into usable fuel for the fusion reactor." Sarah stared at them. "You're talking about rewriting the fundamental laws of physics, not rewriting. Simply recognizing that those laws are more flexible than we previously understood." Thex 7 activated a portable holographic display, showing what looked like a star chart. Webb mapped 17 locations where this phenomenon occurs. With this ship, you could travel between those points using virtually no conventional fuel. "Why are you telling me this? If the Krex Empire knew about this technology, the Empire cannot know." Keth 9's voice was sharp with urgency. "There are factions within our government who would use this discovery to fuel a war machine. Unlimited energy means unlimited power for weapons, for ships, for planetary bombardment systems." Thex 7 nodded grimly. Webb understood this. That is why he worked in secret, why he made his ship look like worthless scrap. He was trying to find a way to share this discovery with the galaxy, without triggering a war. Sarah looked around the cargo hold, trying to process what she was hearing. "And you think I can succeed where he failed?" "We think you are our best hope. Humans have a talent for creative solutions to impossible problems." Webb called it thinking outside the quantum box. The welding torch felt heavy in Sarah's hands. Part of her wanted to throw these aliens off her ship and pretend this conversation had never happened. But another part of her, the part that had spent her life exploring the unknown reaches of space, was already imagining the possibilities. "Show me," she said finally. "Show me how it works." Thex 7's 3 eyes brightened with what might have been relief. "The processing chamber requires specific quantum resonance frequencies to activate. Webb discovered the correct patterns through years of experimentation. But we must be careful. If we activate the system incorrectly, what happens?" Keth 9 made a gesture that Sarah's translator couldn't interpret, but the meaning was clear enough from her tone. "The quantum cascade could tear a hole in space-time itself." Webb called it accidentally opening a door to nowhere. Sarah looked at the three Krek scientists, then at her battered, worthless ship, then at the star chart showing impossible points of light scattered across the galaxy. "All right," she said. "Let's see what this piece of junk can really do." The activation process was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Vex 7 guided her through a series of precise adjustments to the quantum processing chamber, each one requiring calculations that pushed her understanding of physics to its limits. The Krek scientists had been studying Webb's notes for months, but even they seemed nervous about what they were attempting. "The quantum field resonance must be exact," Keth 9 explained as Sarah fine-tuned the harmonic generators. "Too low and nothing happens. Too high, and we risk creating a cascade reaction that could destabilize local spacetime." Sarah's hands were steady as she made the adjustments, but her mind was racing. The equipment they were working with was clearly beyond current galactic technology. Webb hadn't just discovered new physics. He had somehow built devices that could manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself. "How did he figure this out?" she asked as she calibrated the resonance matrix. "Webb was a good scientist, but this is orders of magnitude beyond anything humans have achieved." The third Krek scientist, an elderly male named Vex 2, spoke for the first time since introducing himself. "Webb did not work alone. He had help from someone with access to knowledge far beyond our current understanding." "Help from who?" "We are not certain. Webb's private logs mention a contact he called the Librarian, someone who claimed to represent a very old civilization that had learned these techniques long ago." Sarah paused in her work. "You mean there's someone else out there who already knows how to do this?" "Perhaps. Or perhaps Webb was contacted by automated systems left behind by a dead civilization. The galaxy is full of mysteries, Captain Chen. This may be only the beginning." The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. If there were ancient civilizations with technology this advanced, why hadn't they made contact? And what had happened to them? But those questions would have to wait. The quantum chamber was nearly ready for its first test. "Initiating primary resonance field," Sarah announced, pressing a series of controls that still felt alien under her fingers. The chamber began to hum with a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The ship's sensors immediately started picking up anomalous readings. Space itself seemed to be shifting around them. The background radiation levels fluctuated wildly, and the gravitational field detectors were showing impossible readings. "It's working," Vex 7 said, his voice filled with wonder. "The quantum vacuum is responding to our resonance field. Look at the energy readings." Sarah looked at the displays and felt her breath catch. The processing chamber was extracting energy from empty space itself, converting quantum fluctuations into a form that could be fed directly into the ship's fusion reactor. The fuel tank wasn't really a fuel tank at all. It was a storage system for processed quantum energy. "How much energy can we extract?" she asked. "In regions of high quantum density, theoretically unlimited," Keth 9 replied. Webb's calculations suggested that a single extraction cycle could power the ship for months of normal operation. Sarah was about to respond when the ship's proximity alarms began screaming. Something was approaching the wandering star at high speed, and according to the sensors, it was big. "Captain Chen," came a voice over the communication system. "This is Commander Zex Prime of the Krek's Imperial Navy. You are harboring fugitives and stolen technology. Surrender immediately or we will be forced to take your vessel by force." Sarah looked at the three Krek scientists, understanding dawning on her face. "You're not just researchers, are you?" "You're defectors," Vex 7 nodded grimly. "We discovered what the Imperial Science Council intended to do with Webb's research. Unlimited energy means unlimited power for weapons. Our military leaders see this as an opportunity to crush all opposition and establish Krek's dominance over the entire galaxy." "So you stole the research and ran?" "We tried to convince them that this technology should be shared peacefully with all civilizations. When that failed, we took the data and escaped. We have been hiding on Kepler Station for 2 months, waiting for someone to purchase this ship." The proximity alarms were getting louder. Sarah could see on the sensors that a Krek's heavy cruiser was moving into attack position. Even if the wandering star had been in perfect condition, it would be no match for a military vessel. "Can we run?" she asked. "The quantum drive is not fully calibrated," Vex 2 said. "We need at least another hour to complete the synchronization process." "We don't have an hour." Sarah was already moving toward the ship's bridge, such as it was. The command center of the wandering star consisted of a pilot's chair, a few control panels, and a view screen that flickered intermittently. But it would have to do. "Commander Zex Prime," she said into the communications array. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the independent vessel Wandering Star. I'm not harboring anyone. I have 3 passengers who booked passage to the Outer Rim. Do not lie to us, human. We know that Thex 7 and his accomplices are aboard your vessel. Return them immediately and we may allow you to live." Sarah looked at the tactical display. The Krex cruiser was massive, bristling with weapons that could reduce her ship to atoms in seconds. But something about the situation bothered her. If they wanted to destroy the Wandering Star, why hadn't they opened fire already? They need the ship intact, she realized. They want Webb's technology, but they don't know how it works. Thex 7 appeared on the bridge, moving with the quick, nervous gestures of someone trying not to panic. The quantum processing chamber contains the only working prototype of Webb's extraction system. If it is destroyed, it would take years to rebuild. Then we have leverage. Sarah's mind was already working on a plan. It was insane, dangerous, and would probably get them all killed. But it was the only option she could see. "What are you thinking?" Keth 9 asked. "We're going to give them exactly what they want." Sarah began powering up the ship's engines, both the working one and the one that made interesting noises. "We're going to surrender." "Captain, that is not a wise course of action," Vex 2 said. "Trust me." Sarah opened a communication channel to the Krex cruiser. "Commander Zex Prime, I'm prepared to discuss terms, but I want safe passage for myself in exchange for the fugitives." There was a pause before the Krex commander responded. "You are in no position to negotiate, human." "Actually, I am. See, I've been examining this ship's systems, and I think your scientists are going to be very interested in what I've found. But if you blow us up, you'll never get to see Dr. Webb's final discovery." Another pause, longer this time. Sarah could imagine the discussion taking place on the Krex bridge. Military commanders who wanted to shoot first and ask questions later, balanced against scientists who understood the value of what they were potentially destroying. "You have 5 minutes to prepare for boarding," came the eventual response. "Any attempt to resist or destroy evidence will result in immediate termination." Sarah smiled grimly. 5 minutes. It would have to be enough. "What are you planning?" Thex 7 asked. "Something that Webb would probably approve of," Sarah said as her fingers flew over the quantum chamber controls. "We're going to think outside the quantum box." The Krex scientist looked confused, but Sarah was already deep in calculations. Webb's notes had mentioned something about cascade reactions, about the danger of pushing the quantum extraction process too far. But what if that danger could be turned into a weapon? Not a weapon to destroy the Krex cruiser, but something more subtle. Something that would give them the distraction they needed to escape. "Hold on," Sarah said as she began implementing the most dangerous plan of her life. "This is either going to be brilliant or it's going to tear a hole in space-time." "Which one do you think is more likely?" Keth 9 asked. Sarah grinned as the quantum chamber began to build toward critical resonance. "With human luck? Probably both." Sarah's plan was based on a single line in Webb's encrypted notes. Quantum resonance cascade can create localized space-time distortions. Possible applications for emergency escape, but extreme caution advised. She had about 3 minutes before the Krex boarding party reached the Wandering Star. 3 minutes to create a controlled tier in reality that would let them escape without destroying half the solar system. "This is insane," Thex 7 muttered as he helped Sarah recalibrate the quantum extraction chamber. "We are literally playing with the fundamental forces that hold the universe together." "Sometimes insane is the only option left," Sarah replied, her fingers dancing across controls that still felt foreign. "Besides, Webb's notes suggest he tested this at least once. We just have to hope his calculations were correct." The quantum chamber was beginning to resonate at frequencies that made her teeth ache. The ship's hull was actually vibrating now, and several warning lights had started flashing across the control panels. But the energy readings were extraordinary. The processing chamber was extracting power from the quantum vacuum at a rate that should have been impossible. 30 seconds until the Krex docking clamps engage. Keth 9 reported from the sensor station. Sarah made one final adjustment to the resonance matrix. According to Webb's notes, what she was about to attempt would create a bubble of distorted spacetime around the ship. Inside the bubble, normal physics would still apply, but outside, space itself would become unstable, creating a region that would be extremely dangerous for other ships to approach. "Everyone hold on to something solid," she announced. This is going to get bumpy. She engaged the cascade protocol. Reality hiccuped, for a moment that lasted either an instant or eternity. Sarah felt like she was falling through a universe made of liquid light. The ship around her seemed to stretch and contract like a rubber band, and she could have sworn she heard the sound of space-time itself groaning under the strain. Then everything snapped back to normal, except it wasn't normal at all. The Krex cruiser, which had been less than 100 meters away, was now tumbling end over end, its engines sputtering as it tried to regain control. The space around the wandering star shimmered like heat waves, and the ship's sensors were picking up gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist. It worked, Vex 2 said, his voice filled with amazement. We have created a localized distortion field. The Krex vessel cannot approach without risking serious damage to their ship. Sarah was already powering up the main engines. The left engine responded immediately, but the right one was making even more interesting noises than usual. Still, it was producing thrust, and that was all she needed. Commander Zex Prime, she said into the communications array. As you can see, Dr. Webb's technology is quite real. Unfortunately for you, it's also quite unstable when pushed beyond safe parameters. I suggest you keep your distance. The response came back immediately, and the Krex commander sounded furious. Human, what have you done? Our instruments are detecting massive gravitational distortions. You are endangering this entire star system. Only if you try to follow us, Sarah replied cheerfully. The distortion field will dissipate in about 6 hours, assuming we don't stick around to maintain it. I suggest you use that time to think about whether unlimited energy technology is really something you want to weaponize. She cut the communication channel and focused on plotting a course out of the system. The quantum distortion field was already beginning to decay, but it would give them enough time to reach the edge of the gravity well and jump to hyperspace. Where are we going? Thex 7 asked. Sarah pulled up Webb's star charts, the ones showing the 17 locations where quantum energy density was abnormally high. We're going to finish what Webb started. He wanted to share this technology with the galaxy, right? Then that's what we're going to do. The Krex Empire will not simply let us escape, Keth 9 pointed out. They will send ships to hunt us down. Let them try. Sarah was studying the navigation charts, looking for the closest quantum extraction point. According to Webb's calculations, with a properly calibrated quantum drive, we can travel distances in days that would take conventional ships months. They'll never be able to keep up. The first jump took them to a system 30 light-years from Kepler Station. As soon as they dropped out of hyperspace, Sarah began scanning for the quantum anomaly that Webb's charts indicated should be present. The ship's sensors, crude as they were, immediately detected the telltale signs of elevated quantum field density. There, Vex 2 said, pointing to a region of apparently empty space. The quantum vacuum energy is approximately 40% higher than baseline in that area. Sarah maneuvered the wandering star into position and activated the extraction protocol. This time the process was smooth and controlled. The quantum chamber hummed contentedly as it drew energy from the fabric of space itself, converting it into a form that could power the ship's systems. Incredible, Thex 7 breathed as he watched the energy readings climb. With this much power, we could travel to the far side of the galaxy without stopping. But Sarah was thinking about more than just travel. Webb's technology didn't just solve the problem of starship fuel. It solved the energy crisis that had plagued galactic civilization for centuries. Colonies that struggled to power their cities, research stations that had to ration electricity, entire worlds that remained undeveloped because they lacked adequate energy sources. All of those problems could be eliminated with quantum extraction technology. We need to document everything, she said. Every procedure, every calculation, every safety protocol. If we're going to share this with the galaxy, we need to make sure it can be reproduced safely. Over the next several days, the four of them worked together to create a comprehensive guide to quantum energy extraction. Thex 7 provided the theoretical framework. Keth 9 handled the practical engineering details. Vex 2 contributed safety protocols based on decades of research experience, and Sarah added the human perspective that Webb had valued so highly. But they weren't working in isolation. The Krex Empire had indeed sent ships to hunt them down, and Sarah's unconventional escape had only made the Imperial Navy more determined to capture them. Twice they had to jump to new systems when Krex patrol ships appeared on their sensors. It was during one of these hasty escapes that Sarah discovered something that changed everything. They had just completed a quantum extraction cycle and were preparing to jump to the next system when the ship's long-range sensors detected something unusual. A massive object was approaching their position from the direction of the galactic core, moving at speeds that conventional physics said were impossible. That vessel is traveling at approximately 50 times the speed of light, Vex 2 reported, his voice filled with disbelief. No known technology can achieve such velocities. Sarah studied the sensor readings and a chill ran down her spine. The approaching object was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, and its energy signature was unlike anything in the databases of any known civilization. "I think," she said slowly, "we're about to meet Webb's mysterious contact, the one he called the librarian." As if responding to her words, the ship's communication array suddenly activated on its own. A voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect English with an accent that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Dr. Webb's successors," the voice said. "We have been waiting for you to discover the gift he left behind. It is time for the next lesson." The massive object had stopped just outside the star system, close enough to be clearly visible on the sensors but far enough away to avoid triggering any gravitational disturbances. As Sarah watched, smaller craft began to separate from the main structure, heading in their direction. "Who are you?" Sarah asked. "We are the Keepers of Knowledge," came the reply. "The last representatives of the ancients, those who learned to manipulate the quantum substrate long ago. Dr. Webb was one of the few in your era capable of understanding our teachings." "What do you want with us?" "To complete his work. The galaxy stands at a crossroads, Captain Chen. The discovery of quantum extraction technology will either usher in a new age of prosperity and cooperation, or it will trigger wars that will consume entire star systems. The choice, as always, belongs to the younger races." Sarah looked at her 3 Krex companions, then at the approaching ships that represented technology beyond her wildest imagination. Webb had started something that was bigger than any of them had realized. The question now was whether they were ready to see it through to the end. "All right," she said finally. "Let's see what you want to teach us." The Keeper vessel that docked with the wandering star was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. It seemed to be made of a material that shifted between solid metal and flowing liquid, adapting its shape to perfectly match their ship's docking collar. When the airlock cycled open, she half expected to see some exotic alien being stepped through. Instead, she found herself face to face with what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary human woman in her 50s, wearing simple gray robes and carrying a device that looked like a cross between a tablet computer and a crystal sculpture. "Dr. Chen, I presume," the woman said with a warm smile. "I am Keeper Elena Vasquez, formerly of the Terran Deep Space Research Division. I have been looking forward to meeting Webb's successor." Sarah stared in shock. "You're human?" "I was once. That was approximately 800 years ago, by your calendar." Elena stepped aboard the wandering star with easy familiarity, as if she had been on the ship many times before. "The ancients do not recruit based on species, Dr. Chen. They recruit based on curiosity, creativity, and the ability to think beyond conventional limitations." The 3 Krex scientists gathered behind Sarah, clearly as amazed as she was. Vex 7 was the first to find his voice. 800 years? How is that possible?" "Time moves differently when you learn to work with quantum substrate rather than against it," Elena explained. "The ancients discovered long ago that consciousness itself can be preserved and enhanced through quantum entanglement with the universal information matrix. What you call death is simply a transition to a different state of existence." Sarah's head was spinning. "Are you saying the ancients found a way to achieve immortality?" "Not immortality. Evolution. We learned to exist as both energy and matter, to move freely between different dimensional states, to experience reality from perspectives that biological minds cannot comprehend." Elena gestured to her tablet crystal device, which began projecting holographic images into the air around them. "But with that evolution came responsibility. We became the custodians of knowledge, charged with guiding younger civilizations toward wisdom rather than destruction." The holographic display showed images of vast stellar civilizations rising and falling across millions of years. Some achieved greatness and joined the community of evolved beings. Others destroyed themselves with their own technological advances. "Dr. Webb was part of our long-term plan to introduce quantum manipulation technology to your era," Elena continued. "But his death was Premature. We had hoped to guide the process more carefully. So you've been watching us? Sarah asked. Of course. The moment you activated Webb's quantum extraction system, we detected the resonance patterns. Quite impressive work, by the way. Most species require decades of guidance before they successfully create a controlled quantum cascade. Keth9 stepped forward. If you have this technology, why not share it openly? Why work in secret? Elena's expression grew serious. Because knowledge without wisdom is dangerous, young Krex. Your empire's immediate response to learning about quantum extraction was to weaponize it. This is why we must be selective about who receives our guidance. She activated another holographic display, this one showing a star map of the local galactic region. Red markers indicated dozens of star systems, all pulsing with an ominous light. The Krex military has been conducting experiments based on the incomplete data they recovered from Webb's preliminary research. They are attempting to create quantum weapons capable of destabilizing entire solar systems. 3 prototype devices have already been tested on uninhabited worlds. Sarah felt sick. They're using Webb's discoveries to build superweapons? Indeed, and they are not the only ones. We have detected similar research programs among the hegemony, the corporate collective, and even certain factions within your own Terran government. The galaxy is on the verge of a war that could literally tear spacetime apart. Vex2 spoke for the first time since Elena had arrived. What would you have us do? We are only 4 individuals against entire galactic governments. Elena smiled. 4 individuals who understand the true potential of quantum technology. Dr. Chen, your species has a remarkable talent for finding creative solutions to impossible problems. Dr. Webb chose you as his successor for a reason. Webb didn't choose me, Sarah protested. I just happened to buy his ship. Nothing happens by chance when quantum consciousness is involved, Elena replied cryptically. Your decision to purchase the Wandering Star, your ability to activate systems that should have remained dormant, your instinctive understanding of quantum cascade protocols, these are not coincidences. She gestured to her crystal device again, and the holographic display changed to show technical schematics that made Sarah's head hurt just looking at them. The designs were clearly based on quantum extraction technology, but expanded and refined beyond anything Webb had attempted. These are the plans for a quantum resonance network, Elena explained. A system of interconnected stations that can provide unlimited clean energy to every inhabited world in the galaxy. But more than that, the network can serve as a communication system, a transportation grid, and ultimately a foundation for peaceful cooperation between all species. And you want us to build this? Vex7 asked. We want you to choose whether to build it. The ancients learned long ago that forced evolution leads only to stagnation. Each species must make its own decision about whether to embrace higher forms of existence or remain bound by physical limitations. Sarah studied the schematics, trying to understand the implications. The technology was far beyond anything that existed in the current galaxy, but it was based on principles that she was beginning to comprehend. With the right resources and enough time, it might actually be possible to construct such a network. What about the weapons research? She asked. How do we stop the military factions from destroying everything? Elena's expression grew grim. That depends on how quickly you can implement the alternative. The quantum resonance network, once established, would make traditional weapons obsolete. There would be no point in fighting wars when unlimited resources are available to all. But building something like this would take decades, Keth9 pointed out. The Krex military is talking about deploying quantum weapons within months. Which is why, Elena said, we are prepared to provide you with certain accelerated construction techniques. The ancients have learned methods of quantum manipulation that can reduce construction timeframes from decades to weeks. She handed Sarah the crystal device. The moment it touched her fingers, Sarah felt a surge of information flowing directly into her mind. Not just technical specifications, but an intuitive understanding of how quantum fields could be shaped and molded like clay, how space-time itself could be convinced to cooperate with construction projects, how consciousness and technology could work together to achieve seemingly impossible results. This is incredible, Sarah breathed. With this knowledge, we could build the first network station in a matter of days. But you will need help, Elena warned. The construction process requires precise coordination between multiple quantum fields. One person, even with ancient knowledge, cannot manage the complexity alone. Sarah looked at her three Krex companions. They had already risked everything to prevent their government from weaponizing Webb's research. Now she was asking them to help her build something that would revolutionize galactic civilization. "Are you in?" she asked. Thex 7 nodded immediately. Dr. Webb believed that knowledge should be shared for the benefit of all species. If we can prevent a quantum weapons war while creating unlimited energy for everyone, then we must try. Keth 9 and Vex 2 quickly agreed. The decision was unanimous. Elena smiled with what might have been relief. "Then let us begin. But first, we must find a suitable location for the first resonance station, somewhere protected from military interference but accessible to representatives from all major civilizations." Sarah already had an idea. "What about Kepler Station? It's a neutral trading post, technically independent from all the major governments, and it's where this whole adventure started." "Perfect," Elena said, "and rather poetic." Dr. Webb would have approved. As the Keeper vessel prepared to guide them back toward Kepler Station, Sarah realized that her life had taken another completely unexpected turn. A week ago, she had been a broke ex-survey captain, trying to scrape together enough credits for passage home. Now she was carrying ancient knowledge and preparing to build technology that could change the fate of the entire galaxy. The Wandering Star, with all its rust and rattles and jury-rigged systems, was about to become the most important ship in known space. And somehow, Sarah was starting to think that Webb had planned it that way all along. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station, watching as the first quantum resonance station took shape in the space beyond the docking bays. The construction process was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. Instead of building the station piece by piece, they were literally convincing space-time to reorganize itself into the desired configuration. The ancient knowledge that Elena had shared was both exhilarating and terrifying. Sarah could feel the quantum fields responding to her thoughts, matter and energy dancing together in patterns that conventional physics said were impossible. But the process required absolute focus. One mistake, one moment of doubt or confusion, and the cascading quantum effects could tear a hole in reality itself. "The primary resonance chamber is stabilizing," Thex 7 reported from the construction control center they had set up in an abandoned cargo bay. "Quantum field coherence is holding at 97%. Sarah nodded, her attention still focused on the delicate process of quantum manipulation. Through the ancient device, she could feel the station's consciousness beginning to emerge. Not artificial intelligence in the conventional sense, but something far more subtle, a quantum awareness that would allow the station to monitor and maintain its own systems. "External power coupling in place," Keth 9 announced. The station is now drawing energy directly from the quantum substrate. The energy readings were extraordinary. The resonance station was extracting more power from empty space in a single minute than most planets consumed in a year. But unlike conventional power generation, the process produced no waste, no pollution, no dangerous byproducts. It was literally creating energy from the fundamental structure of the universe itself. "Incoming transmission," Vex 2 called out, multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. "Configuration suggests a mixed fleet." Sarah felt her stomach drop. They had been working around the clock to complete the first station, before the various military factions could organize a response. But it looked like their time had run out. "How many ships?" she asked. 12 vessels, 3 Krex Imperial Navy cruisers, 4 Terran Defense Force destroyers, 3 hegemony battleships, and 2 corporate collective dreadnoughts. A combined fleet representing all the major galactic powers. Either they were here to witness the birth of a new age or they were here to prevent it. "This is Admiral Keck Supreme of the Krex Imperial Navy," came a voice over the station's communication system. "You will cease construction immediately and surrender all quantum technology to proper military authority." Sarah exchanged glances with her companions. They had known this moment would come, but she had hoped to have the station completed before facing it. "Admiral," she replied, "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the independent research vessel, Wandering Star. We are conducting peaceful scientific research under the protection of Kepler Station's neutrality agreements. You are constructing weapons of mass destruction," came another voice, this one from the Terran fleet. "I am Admiral Rebecca Torres of the TDF. We have authorization to use all necessary force to prevent the deployment of quantum superweapons." "With respect, Admiral Torres, we're not building weapons. We're building the opposite of weapons. Elena appeared beside Sarah, moving with the silent grace that all the ancients seemed to possess. "Perhaps it is time for a demonstration," she suggested quietly. Sarah nodded and activated the station's external communication array. "All vessels, this is the Kepler Quantum Research Station. We invite you to witness the activation of the galaxy's first quantum resonance network node." "You will not activate anything," Admiral Keck Supreme commanded. "Power down immediately or we will open fire." "I wouldn't recommend that," Sarah replied calmly. "Our station is currently generating approximately 10,000 times the energy output of your combined fleets. Any weapons fired directed at us will be absorbed and converted to additional power for our systems." It was a bluff, but not entirely. The ancient knowledge included defensive protocols that could indeed convert incoming energy attacks into usable power. The question was whether the station's systems were stable enough to handle that kind of stress. "Admiral Torres," Sarah continued, "your own scientists have been working on quantum weapons research. You know what that technology can do. What we're offering is something different, something better." She gestured to Elena, who activated a holographic display visible to all the ships in the area. The display showed the technical specifications for the resonance network, along with projections of what galactic civilization could become with unlimited clean energy. "No more energy shortages," Sarah explained. "No more resource wars. No more worlds left undeveloped because they lack adequate power sources. The quantum resonance network can provide enough energy to support trillions of beings in comfort and prosperity, and give whoever controls it dominion over the entire galaxy." Admiral Torres replied skeptically. "Nobody controls it," Elena said, speaking for the first time since the fleets had arrived. "The network is self-governing, designed to provide energy freely to all who request it. There are no off switches, no way to weaponize the system, no method of denying access to any world or species." "Impossible," scoffed Admiral Keck Supreme. "All technology can be weaponized." "Not ancient technology," Elena replied. "We learned long ago that tools of creation cannot be turned to destruction without destroying themselves. The resonance network exists in a quantum state that makes weaponization literally impossible." To prove her point, Elena activated another function of the station. Suddenly, every ship in the area found their energy weapons disabled, not damaged or destroyed, simply turned off, as if the universe itself had decided that such devices had no place in the presence of the resonance station. "What have you done to our ships?" Admiral Torres demanded. "Nothing permanent," Sarah assured her. "The station generates a quantum field that neutralizes aggressive technology, while leaving defensive and life support systems completely unaffected. As soon as you move out of range, your weapons will function normally." The combined fleet hung in space, apparently paralyzed by the implications of what they were witnessing. Technology that could disable weapons while providing unlimited energy was a game-changer of unprecedented magnitude. "This is Commander Yex-7 of the hegemony ship Destiny's Edge," came a new voice. "Our science officers are confirming that the energy readings from your station are legitimate." "The implications are significant," Sarah smiled. The hegemony had always been more interested in scientific advancement than military conquest. If she could convince them, the others might follow. "Commander, we're prepared to share the complete technical specifications for the resonance network with all interested parties. But construction must be voluntary. No species can be forced to accept the technology. And if we refuse," Admiral Keck Supreme asked. "Then you refuse," Elena said simply. The ancients learned long ago that wisdom cannot be imposed. Each species must choose its own path to evolution or stagnation. Over the next several hours, representatives from each fleet transferred to Kepler Station to examine the resonance network firsthand. The scientists and engineers were universally amazed by what they saw. The military commanders were more skeptical, but even they could not deny the potential benefits of unlimited clean energy. In the end, it was Admiral Torres who spoke for all of them. "Captain Chen, what you're proposing would fundamentally change the nature of galactic civilization. The political implications alone are staggering." "Change is never easy," Sarah agreed. "But the alternative is a war fought with quantum weapons that could literally tear the galaxy apart. Is that really preferable to a future of abundance and cooperation?" The debate continued for days. Some factions wanted to seize the technology for themselves. Others worried about the loss of strategic advantages that came from energy scarcity. But gradually, as word of the resonance station spread throughout the galaxy, public opinion began to shift in favor of the network. 3 months after the first station came online, construction began on a second node in the Centauri system, then a third in Krek space, then a fourth in hegemony territory. Each new station made the network more powerful and more stable, creating a web of quantum energy that connected distant worlds and species. Sarah stood once again on the observation deck of Kepler Station, but now she was watching the arrival of delegations from a dozen different species, all coming to study the resonance technology and plan new network expansions. The wandering star sat in its docking bay, still rust-covered and jury-rigged, but now recognized as the ship that had changed the course of galactic history. "Do you ever regret it?" Helena asked, appearing beside her with that unsettling ancient habit of materializing without warning. "Regret what?" "Buying a worthless piece of junk for 5,000 credits, Sarah laughed. "Best investment I ever made. Though I have to admit, when Kex told me to take the ship because it was useless, I never imagined this would be the result." "Dr. Webb would be proud," Elena said. "He always believed that humans had the creativity and determination to turn impossible situations to their advantage." "What about you?" Sarah asked. "Are you going to stick around, or do you have other civilizations to guide toward enlightenment?" Elena smiled. "The ancients are patient, Dr. Chen. We have waited millions of years for the galaxy to reach this point. Now that the foundation has been laid, we can afford to wait a little longer to see what you younger species build upon it." Sarah nodded, turning her attention back to the ships arriving and departing from the station. Each one carried delegates, scientists, engineers, and dreamers who would help expand the resonance network to every corner of the galaxy. It had all started with a desperate ex-survey captain buying the cheapest ship she could find. Now that same ship had become the catalyst for the greatest transformation in galactic history. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the most important journeys begin with taking something that everyone else considers worthless and discovering that it's actually priceless. The wandering star had taught her that lesson, and now perhaps the rest of the galaxy would learn it too.